Well, hey, gang, my name is Nate Bush, and lead pastor at New City Church, and we just finished our first message in the Weeds in My Garden series on mental health, and I'm so excited because I have a guest in this Deeper Dive podcast with me to help me process all that we went through today as we talked about anxiety in week one of Weeds in My Garden. So let me introduce you my guest. My guest is Annie Snyder. Annie, welcome, and introduce yourself and tell us what you do.
Hey guys, I'm Annie Snyder. I am owner and clinical director over at Albuquerque Mental Health, which is an outpatient counseling center for people in the community who are struggling with anxiety or depression, trauma, and stress. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I've been at this since 2003. So just coming on 20 years.
Wow.
A milestone.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, so, you sit in a different seat than I sit in. I do not have an expertise in counseling, in therapy. I'm a pastor, doing my best to help kind of facilitate this conversation on mental health. And so I was just curious if there's anything in the talk today that you heard and you thought, man, that's something that was really good and relevant. And if there's anything that you felt like, boy, this is a space that may have been we could have explored a little bit more deeply, or we didn't explore it, but we probably should have as we talk about anxiety as a topic. So feel free to dive into either one of those questions. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I think starting out with anxiety was a really great appetizer, if you will, to the world of mental health, because all of us have had it. If it's anything from like a job interview to doing a podcast for the very first time to, all of our kids went back to school. So the first day of school, anxiety comes in so many colors that I think it's really important to address that as it's probably happened to you. It's happened to your next door neighbor. It happens to your kids. And one of the things that I really appreciated was talking about anxiety in teens is not just something that's happened with COVID. Oftentimes I tell people that COVID-19 is the black light in the hotel room. It's not creating anything new. It's just highlighting the ickiness that's everywhere. And so I think if anything, COVID-19 has been a really good time to start normalizing mental health, depression, anxiety, trauma, and people are talking about it a lot more often. There's not as much taboo around mental health. It really is just kind of normalizing what most of us have at any point in time struggled with. And one of the things that I thought was very interesting was on that interactive poll, I want to say 100% of the people have struggled with some sort of mental health problem in the last year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was 1% of people who said none of the above. The rest, the 99% of us, were in some way had experienced anxiety or burnout, depression. The highest was anxiety by far at 28%, but then 25% burnout. And so the depression and loneliness were about equal in that sort of experience. And so I thought that was really, really interesting that you're right. I mean, virtually 100% of people, 99% of us have had a mental health struggle in the past 12 months.
Yeah, it is rampant, and it's also treatable, which I think one of the things that this series is offering is hope. There's hope in Jesus, and there's also hope in taking care of yourself and surrounding yourself with people that care, that it can be a joint effort that is treatable. It is not a hopeless diagnosis or struggle at all.
Yeah, that's really good. I mean, I think that's the whole hope of the series, is that it's just underscoring how the knobs that we can turn and the things that we can do, and those are gifts of God. God's given us these gifts to better care for ourselves. So, how about an area in anxiety where you thought, man, this would have been an interesting thing to bring up? Obviously, we can't bring up everything in a 35-minute talk, but what was something that you would like to have heard more of, or maybe you thought, oh, this is an ad, I think, that would really add to the conversation we started on Sunday?
I think you really touched on taking care of ourselves and health as something to really
Yeah.
combat anxiety. Most of the time, people's anxiety, not every time, but a lot of the time, if you have anxiety, it's, I tell people it's not a GPS, it's a compass, that it points you in the direction of something in your life that
Yeah.
needs a little tweaking. And you touched on, are you eating well? Are you exercising? Exercise is the most under prescribed anxiety solution. Are you eating well? How's your sleep hygiene? Are you up until 2 in the morning and up at 6 a.m.? How's your community? Are you isolating? Anxiety causes us to regress, and that is not an antidote. That you really have to, like Amanda said, you have to put yourself out there and be vulnerable, and that's gonna bring up anxiety. But there is power and there is safety when other people know what you're struggling with, because you are not isolated, you're not alone, and you have people that genuinely care. Almost every person in that poll had at least one, if not multiple people that they could turn to. So if you have these people in your tribe, reach out to them.
I've had so many people stop me in the hallway today and even in the preparation for this series and say, thank you so much for talking about this, because I feel like church hasn't always been a safe place to have this conversation. And I will say a lot of men have been coming to me and saying that very thing. And so I think, it's that was a surprise to me. I didn't see that coming. I don't know if I have a but and here on that for you to chime into, but it's just that was something that was really surprising both from the data, how many people are just open about that they've been seeing somebody for their mental health, but also the number of people who've come up to me just personally, it's anecdotal, but said, I didn't feel like the church was a safe place for me to have this conversation.
No, I think that is accurate. That I think that not intentionally, but I think Christians can, in a well-intentioned way, create a very invalidating environment for people who struggle with mental health concerns to acknowledge what's happening. I think our church has, I don't think our church, the church in general has a lot of, I call them Hallmark card cliche terms that we tend to use when we get a little uncomfortable, like we'll just pray it away, take it to the cross. When God closes the door, he opens the window. I'm like, no, sometimes the door gets slammed in your face and the window is sealed shut and there's no way out. And so people who seek help in the church, they try to come, they try to be open, they try to be transparent, and they can be met with people that have no idea what to say to that. And so platitudes are said, which are not helpful. And so I think what our church is really trying hard to do is say, bring it, put it on the table, and we're going to talk about it. And it's going to be uncomfortable and icky and gross, and we're going to talk about it. And our church has never been a place to shy away from talking about the hard things. And this is a hard topic. And so I think what you said, I think what you said, the more you talk about it, the more other people talk about it too.
Yeah, I agree. And I think talking about it too, as you know, I mean, when people come in to a session and they're vulnerable with you in a therapy session, there is something cathartic about talking about it as well. And we have a video testimony for almost every week of the series, and without an exception, people who have given a testimony about their mental health story have said, I felt better leaving than I came. Like, I think there was some anxiety about sharing the story, and then when the story gets shared, it feels like a relief and a release. And I think theologically, I will point to kind of how we're made and Adam and Eve's response, and how hiding in sin and hiding in shame is a response. And hiding is like just like there's no way for healing in hiding. You know, you have to talk, and you have to come clean, and that's part of what God does as a counselor too in the garden. Like, you know, is He's counseling, He's asking questions, He's giving them opportunity to confess and pulling out of them. So I see that from a pastor perspective, but from a clinical perspective, do you think I'm onto something there and sort of talking about our story as just that alone is helpful?
Yeah, I think that I tell my clients shame is an interesting or complicated emotion to have, because most of the time it comes out of a learned external reaction. So shame is not necessarily an innate emotion that you have. It comes as a result of an interaction. And so all of us have usually early childhood narratives that we create about shame. And if we learn at an early age, I can't be transparent, I can't be vulnerable, I can't be open, or I tried to like talk to mom about I'm really scared to go on the playground, and mom's like, oh, you're fine, just go have fun, don't be shy. Then you learn that my emotional reaction is not right, it's not okay, it's not good. People are going to tell me it's wrong, so I'm going to lock it up. And I'm going to go around and act as if, and you were talking about that earlier, I'm going to act as if everything is okay. And so there's a lot of people walking around looking like they've got their stuff together and acting as if, and then on the inside, it's just this internal crisis after crisis after crisis. And so how people present themselves to the world is not how they feel on the inside. How I present is the way people are going to treat me. And so you're just walking around like man has said, like I'm this walking contradiction of how I present and who I am is not congruent. And that is maddening, and that's tiring, and you can't sustain that because it's not genuine. And I think if you can at least talk about the outside not matching the inside, then you have material to work with. A cheesy thing I tell my clients is that if you can name it, you can change it, which doesn't entirely rhyme, but that's what we say. And so if you can talk about it, then you have agency to change it. But as long as you're not talking about it and you're putting it over in the corner, then it's going to be like chirping in your ear, like I'm here, I'm not going anywhere, and it's not going to change into anything else.
Yeah, you can't change what you can't name, if you want to use that one. Yeah, I like that.
Kind of rhymes.
Yeah, it kind of rhymes. It's good. No, that's so true. It's such a truism. And Amanda's story, we'll post online. You can see her story. And I think it's that the honesty of her story was what was so great. It's like, I'm just going to be honest about my story. Here's my story. And there's healing in honesty. I think honesty can bring about some healing. It's when we're living in contradiction to ourselves that I think that anxiety perpetuates. You know, when I know I'm not presenting my true self to the world, and I mean, it's okay to, I think correct me if I'm wrong on this, Annie, from your perspective, I think it's okay to put your best foot forward. That's totally okay. What's not okay is to live a lie. Is to knowingly live out in the world something that's not true of you in the inside. You can't do that for very long without having that fear, imposter syndrome, that fear of being found out, and that will perpetuate the anxiety. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. I think a really good example that you said this morning was, if my arm is broken, it is very clear that my arm is broken and that I have a cast on it. People are going to hold the door. They're going to let me go ahead. It's really obvious I have an injury. And if I'm not talking about internal injuries, then people are not going to treat me. I don't want to say with the problems that I have, but it's not going to create growth and change. And so I'm kind of like what you said, I'm not going to tell everyone, hey, I have a t-shirt that says I struggle with anxiety, treat me like that. Like, that's not helpful either. Right. But I think there's a tension between owning it and doing what you can and having it be a part of your story, but not all of your story. That is absolutely, I tell people, stuff like anxiety is like a tapestry. That there's all of us have like grandma's hand-me-down tapestries where you got all those little squares, and there's always that like kind of one square that's like kind of ugly, you don't really like it, put it in the corner, but you have to have that to make an entire tapestry. So it's a part of your story,
Yeah.
but you don't have to put it like right in the center, but it's a part of it. It's a part of who
Yeah.
you are, and it has to be incorporated.
Yeah, and I think that, yeah, I mentioned in the message that, a counselor had said, "Hey, Nate, you're not going to get over your story, but you have to put it under good management," and how life giving and life changing that was, and I think there's a kind of a belief that maybe a lot of us have. I know I certainly had it, that if I just work hard enough and press in hard enough, that maybe this won't come up anymore. As if I could delete a part of the story that I actually lived. And I know saying that out loud, it sounds so dumb to say, "Oh, I'm just going to act like that never happened, and hopefully one day it'll be as if it never happened." And life doesn't work that way. Did that resonate with you at all, or do you have anything to add to that idea?
Yeah, no, I think I had never heard that quote, but I think putting it under new management and under the umbrella of the church having Jesus as the manager, it offers hope and it offers encouragement.
Yes.
So I think something that I tell clients is that if your anxiety comes out, you can say, you know what, you can have a seat at the kitchen table. Like, I'm not going to entertain you. I'm not going to offer you, snacks. I'm not going to try to push you off and hide you, but you can come and hang out, but I'm not going to add to you. And so I think what you said about having it under new management, I'm going to acknowledge you, but I'm not going to give you more power than you have to have. You can hang out, but you're not in charge.
Yeah. And I think that's where I want to get to, kind of to close things, is like when it's under new management, every time it does show up, it's like, I know how I'm going to handle you. Yeah, I know I have a management strategy. When it's not under management and you're trying to pretend it doesn't happen, when it does come up, it's always shocking and disorienting. It's like, oh, I thought I was over that, and I'm not over that, and here it is again. And when it hasn't really been, properly put under the right kind of management. And I think that when it's being managed, like under grace, for example, I'm human sized, I don't have to overcome this, or, God's economy is one of grace, and I got to be at least as kind to myself as Jesus is to me. And those things really do help to kind of, when the thing comes up, when that story does come up, to like dissipate it a little bit. I want to talk about strategies with you. I gave just a simple tool today of observe, name, and displace. Just any thoughts on that or adds to that, and then let's just talk about some other tools when the anxious feelings arise, when you feel spinning of the mind, tightening of the gut, racing of the heart. What do you do? How do you respond to that?
Yeah. I love that exercise. I think having a card where you can take it, you can take a picture of it and carry it. Because I tell people any technique to practice when you have, or to try when you have anxiety, practice it when your anxiety is super low. Like, do not practice it for the first time ever right before you're going into a job interview. Like, it's not going to be helpful. So practice all these techniques and tips when your anxiety is on the lower end. And so I think that tip that you use about observing and describing, a lot of the times, if you can just say, and a lot of this needs to happen out loud, because anxiety is in our head and it rarely happens out there. And so if I can say out loud, "Ooh, my blood pressure is getting a little bit high, my hands are getting a little bit sweaty, I'm feeling a little bit achy," if you can learn to, like you said about that grumbly tumbly, it can be in your stomach. I carry mine here, and I say, "Ooh, my shoulders are tensing up." I can relax them, and I can actively tell myself out loud. So it's almost as if it's happening outside of me, and I'm hearing someone else tell you. If you're saying it internally, your anxious brain is competing with your problem-solving brain, and from this is a whole other episode, but from like a brain chemistry level, anxious brain is always going to trump rational brain. It's going to be like, no, you need to be sweaty, you need to clench up, you need to keep that chest to protect you. And so if you say it out loud, it just takes the heat and the pressure off of it. And so anything that you're going to say it out loud, and say it with authority. If I say, "You know what, I'm feeling a little anxious," no, you have to say it with power and own it. So if you can observe it and you can describe it, and then I loved what you said. I teach people this all the time. Add the attachment to it. because oftentimes
Yeah.
it's not what's happening that's tripping us up. It's
Yeah.
what am I attaching to it? And our attachments are going to carry a lot more truth
Yeah.
than what actually happened. And so if I can say
Yeah.
I'm having anxiety because I almost got in a car crash, yeah, that's going to cause anxiety. But if my narrative is I got in a car crash before, I'm a terrible driver, about any of these other things, that's what's going to perpetuate it. It's what that narrative is that we give to what happens is going to cause that anxiety to perpetuate it. So if I can say, this is the story I'm telling myself, I can say, okay, maybe this is true or not. I don't care. Here's what else is true. And all the scriptures and the Psalms and the Proverbs that has to do with anxiety, and that all of these other things can kind of counteract it. It's not going to make it go away. It's not going to make you completely happy clappy. It's going to just kind of chill it out. And that's what's going to teach your brain to not react to such a heightened level every time. Does that make sense?
That's really good. No, that's really good. Yeah, I think, as you're right, anxious mind always trumps. That's so good. The rational mind, which is why, just to add to it, you have to, like when you're in the throes of anxiety, suspend all critical decision making. It's just the worst time to make a decision. I know that when I'm feeling anxious, those are the times where I'm like, man, I just want to quit. I just want to, and it's like these big ultimatum decision things, and that's the worst time to make a decision. And I think just kind of outlawing that. You just cannot make a decision when you're in those high anxiety moments.
Yeah. Something I tell my kids about anxiety or this kind of stuff is that you will never regret waiting a little bit longer to make a decision. You may regret making the decision. So go with the decision that may cause less regret. And I also had a person tell me a long time ago to never make an important decision at night or when it's raining. And so I tell people, when you're having anxiety, it is pouring down rain at 2 a.m.
Yeah.
You're not going to make good decisions
Yeah.
when that's happening.
That's really good.
And you will likely not regret that.
Yeah. I gave that breath exercise today, and I did feel a lot less anxious. Just sort of breathing in. The Lord is my shepherd; I shall not want, and He makes me lie down in green pastures. And is there anything else that any tips or tricks you have for loosening that tension in the shoulders? The loosening the gut. Slowing the heart rate. Anything else to add to that?
Yeah. So that was a great exercise. As I said earlier, have that and practice it. So practicing it in church, I was inhaling when you were saying that and exhaling it. That was great because I was at a very low level of anxiety, and practicing it helped me create a new neural pathway in my brain. So when I am anxious, I've already practiced that, and I can jump to it a lot more quickly. In regard to other tools, one of the things that I have every client of mine make, it's going to sound cheesy, but trust me, it works really well, is a 5 senses kit. So our anxiety and our emotional reactions are 9 times out of 10 tied to our senses: smell, sight, touch, sound, and taste. And if I can, and all of us are hardwired to have a reaction to 1 or 2 of those. And so I tell people, create a kit of an essential oil that smells great. I prefer the orange, lemon, citrusy. Carry it around. Smelling it, it's going to jolt your brain into, oh, that smells good. I can relax. Like if I'm smelling flowers that my husband brought home, I'm not tensing up smelling them. You relax and you smell it. Those real sour jawbreaker candies that even when you talk about them, it gets you right up there. If you are having anxiety and you throw some, what are they called? Sour Patch Kids, Crybabies, Warheads, throw those in, you're going to jolt your brain from anxiety, and you're just going to, whoa. And that will give you, it sounds so cheesy, but even just a little jolt recalibrates your brain. Like if you almost have an accident, you crash, and then you go back and you, it just recalibrates. There are any of those white app or those white noise apps on your
Oh,
telephone. I have one. There's 100 of them. Choose one ahead of time
yeah.
that you enjoy. If it's like wind chimes or anything, there's like 100 of them. Choose that and just play it, and that breathe in and out. Tying it to scripture is great.
Yeah.
Having a picture of a place that you love, a place that's calming. I would not suggest your partner or your children, even though you love your partner and your children. If your child is what's causing you anxiety, looking at that picture is not going to be helpful. So just something a little more like neutral. And then
Yeah.
a texture that you enjoy that's calming. A piece of like sandpaper, a rock, some material. That's why kids who have blankets rub it under their nose, rub it on their hands, because that repetition of touch is very calming. So any sort of like material that you have, those sequins that you swipe that change colors
Yeah.
are very calming. And so if you have those, and again, you practice them when you're not highly anxious, you can pop it out, and it is so calming.
That's so good. I like that. It's a disruption to a neural sort of pathway that's ingrained. Is that anxiety often is like associated with fear, which I don't know if you'd agree with that, Annie, but it feels like to me anxiety is like this sort of Seth Godin calls it experiencing failure in advance. It's kind of like this sort of I am afraid this really bad thing's about to happen any minute, and it sort of suddenly comes on you. And so having something that just sort of just disrupts that pattern and can help turn your mind onto a scripture verse or something that gives you comfort, an eternal truth about God that is that does actually trump the temporal truth, the temporal sort of story you're living in. That's really, really helpful. That's so good.
No, I think that's a great quote, because rarely is anxiety tied with what's happening right now. It's two steps down the line. It's tomorrow, it's next week. And so if I can say, okay, I'm anxious about what's happening here, what do I have control over here? I have control over prayer, reading the Bible, scripture, reaching out to somebody, taking care of myself before the interview tomorrow, all these other things I can control. And so it helps create some sense of agency when anxiety is connected to whatever the opposite of agency is. So rein it in until you come to something along that line that you have control over.
That's really good. Yeah, and I think that's why I pointed to something like physical health as a good response, is that it is something you have control over and have agency, and so it helps you to feel like, oh, I'm not out of control. I have found like lifting heavy weights does it for me, and I can put my body under strain, and then get the good chemicals moving around in my system, but also helps me to dissipate those sort of negative ones, the cortisol and the other things that kind of have me on high alert. That can be really helpful. And just knowing that you can do something can be everything. When you're feeling that anxiety. At least that's how I've experienced it.
Yeah, it counteracts the helplessness of anxiety.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, and that compounds the anxieties when you feel like the anxiety is in control of you, instead of you kind of having the ability to put it under good management. To come back to that, a call back. I think it's okay. Now I have a strategy. I can put this under good management. It's not in control of me. I'm in control of it. And I think your point earlier is I'm not going to eradicate it from my life. It's not going away, but I can't have a strategy for dealing with it, and I think dissipating its ultimate effect. It doesn't have to be the thing that it's always sort of dominating my life.
And consciously saying, okay, I have anxiety. I may not be able to change that, but if I drink a 12-pack, is that going to make the anxiety worse or better? Probably worse, and then you have anxiety tomorrow, and that perpetuates it. Or I have anxiety, I feel like crap, I'm going to go to the gym, or I'm going to go for a run, or I'm going to choose to eat healthy. That's not going to cure it, it's going to help it. And so choosing the maybe not what you really want to do at that particular time, trusting in the long run, I promise going to the gym is going to be a lot more positive outcome, or maybe not even positive, like neutral outcome than the 12-pack.
Yeah, that's so good. And it's also, if you know that like chronic anxiety is going to be something that you're going to be dealing with, it's just sort of this constant part of your life. Then you want to be prepared for it when it's happening, and so it's probably not the wisest choice to be trying to avoid dealing with your anxiety through alcohol or drug use. Those are going to be the things that are going to compound the injury. And so dial those things way back and turn to healthy things. So I think that idea that we're fearfully and wonderfully made. God made your body, your material self, and your immaterial self to work together, and so this is also part of the big story of God, is that the resurrection of our bodies, and so bodies are a part of our forever, and so our minds, our souls, our hearts, our bodies are always going to be together, and why God did it that way, you can ask Him later, but it is a good thing that you can do things in your flesh that affect your mental health, and that is a very positive thing and a gift from God.
Yeah.
Well, Annie, it's we're 33 minutes into this. I got a final word. I'm going to give you a final word, and we're gonna trust this first podcast, this first voyage into the unknown for you and me works out.
We'll see.
but I'll give my final word first. And I'll let you have the final word. But my final word is this: that you are not ever helpless, and you are not ever without hope. There is help and there is hope, and if you're struggling with anxiety, I want you to know that there are things you can do, and they're gifts of God, the things that you can do. And so just take a simple breath exercise. Take all of Psalms 23 if you need it. Just go through it. Take a breath. Let the mind just kind of relax. Forbid yourself from making critical decisions during those high stress, high anxiety moments. Treat yourself at least as good as Jesus treats you, and you'll find help, and you'll find hope there. Always you can visit our resource page at New City. You can find a good counselor, someone you can talk to and depend upon. I hope if you need that. And I would say this, just one. I've got like a lot of final words, Annie. I got one more final word. I mentioned today there's like this continuum of I can to I can't, kind of deal with this, and it's not always sure. I want to say, if you're not sure if you can deal with this on your own, then you need to see somebody. And just if you're not sure I can handle this, then just go see somebody. And it doesn't have to be forever. I've had a couple sessions a year for a long time, and those have all mostly just been tune-ups. Just like, I feel great. I feel like I'm doing all right. I just want to be ready if something bad happens, and they just serve me so well. And so I just want you to know that it's not like a lifetime sentence of counseling. The hope is that you get the tools you need, and you climb out of the slump. And this is not a forever thing. So my words. You take it away.
No, I have a client who calls it getting his oil changed, where he'll come in every couple of months. and I compare it to, all of us have those people in our lives that maybe I haven't seen for years, but because they know me so well, we can pick up right when we left off. And a counselor can actually be that person that knows your history, knows all that stuff, and you can pick up right where you left off. And so even if you're not planning on seeing somebody long term, that's great. Connect with the person that knows your story, knows your history, so that you have that person if and when you're starting to struggle, or you're going to change jobs, or whatever life throws at you, you have that person to have that tune-up with, have that oil change. And I call it urgent care versus primary care. That there are some of us that are going to check in with somebody regularly as our primary care, and there's others that are going to be urgent care. I tell people, try not to use counselors as like the ER, because normally when you get to the ER point, there's a lot you're going to have to tease through. So primary care to urgent care is a great place to call around.
I love that. Really good. Great final word. Thanks for tuning in. Invite a friend to the series. This is going to be a lot of fun.
Guys, thank you so much for coming.
Awesome.
Bye, Nate.
Blessings.